welcome back to the rollout. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Genevieve.
And
welcome.
Yay! Yeah, we've got a very exciting episode today. Lots of hands-on-y stuff, but we'll kick it off with the news first.
So in the news, we have the pre-order of Dune Adventures in the Imperium coming up. It should be available the second week of December, which is...
Now.
We're in it. It's now we're in it, but there hasn't, from what I have found, there hasn't been anything released quite yet. But this game is made by it's Morpheus, right? No, yeah, it's Modifius. So keep an eye out for that. The Dune RPG was actually voted 2020's most anticipated RPG game. I don't know. We'll find out when it comes out any day now.
All right, and for all you Pathfinder fans out there, Humble Bumble, their latest Humble Bumble that they have out is Pathfinder Edition. You get official ebooks and PDFs, the Dragon Slayer Handbook, Dungeon Denizens, Hell Unleashed, Mystery Monster Revisited, Monster Summoners. If you're not familiar with Pathfinder, it's a basically choose your own price sort of deal. And your purchases do go to support charity. In this case, it's going to be Comic Books for Kids charity. So it makes sure kids that are in hospitals or cancer centers can get comic books. So that Humble Bubble is going to be available today through January 4th. And yeah, the total price of all those books apparently is close to $400. So yeah. All right, so today we are talking about mini painting, and we have some fantastic guests with us. We have Lizz Metcalf, April Hill, and Gary Ledford. Hi, everyone. Hi.
Oh my gosh.
Y'all doing?
Real quick, I just want to go around and tell us a little bit about who you are. We'll start with, I guess, Lizz, and then April, and then Gary, just because that's how I'm seeing you.
Okay. Cool. Hi, I'm Liz. You can find me as Lizifer on pretty much anything. I am currently playing in the Monday game of Legends of Shao Gal as Daffodil. She's a Bardlock now. And on our whimsical adventures. But outside of Fable 42, I am a fantasy artist. I paint a lot, and which also brings me to my love of painting minis as well. Littler things to paint. But yeah, check me out on Twitch or Instagram or Twitter.
There you go. All right, April.
My name is April Hill. You can find me at _creator on Instagram, and also on Fabled 42. I am on this show, Vault 42, every Saturday night. I'm the overseer for it. Every Saturday night at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tonight, you can also see me on Realms of Ucador at 6:30 as well. 6:30 tonight. I play an Air Genasi. And a few other things on here as well, but same thing as Liz. I do miniature painting and terrain building and stuff like that for my game, but I also before all this I had a love of painting, and I have an Etsy store where I paint Converse and high heels. So
I love me some Converse. I have way more than I want to admit on this stream.
That's fun. I love high heels, and I have way
That's
more
why we are co-hosts.
I want to admit on this stream.
All right, Gary.
Hi, I'm Gary Ledford. You can find me at The Mighty Jabberwock on Instagram. And I have a love of miniature. Love is the wrong word. I'm an addict to miniature painting, paints. I've been doing it since 1980 something. And we started with testers and enamels. And I've been gaming about the same amount of time. I'm a geek of many avenues, so I also do sword fighting and other things that I don't want to talk about in polite company.
I'm sorry to be supporting your addiction tonight, but
yes, exactly. Okay, all right, guys. I guess just to kick things off, obviously, Liz, April, you guys are artists in your own right as well, and Gary, what is it about minis that makes it so unique from like an artistry standpoint, painting standpoint? What is it about these little things that we love and cherish and spend way too much money on? Liz, do you want to start off?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, minis were such a bridge for me coming from a two-dimensional medium going into a three-dimensional medium, which is awesome. It opens up so many different techniques because the funny thing is the same way you would paint a canvas is not the same way you would paint a mini. It's actually quite different. If you go in trying to paint it like a canvas, you're going to create a lot of extra work for yourself. And actually, there's a lot of tricks to simplify mini painting that you can't use with two-dimensional art, for instance. But for me, it was being able to touch a tangible creation of either my character or an NPC or a monster or something from an incredible story, and it comes to life right in front of you. And not just that, but you get to pick who, like, you get to paint their character into them, like their little leather bags, their little cutlass, whatever thing they have, it tells a story. And you can even use minis as a base and then add on different things, which I can talk about a bit more in depth later. But really, it's just bringing characters and story and fantasy to life in a tangible form.
April, what about for you?
I mean, I think with most collectibles, they're all like little things. I mean, like you see all these kids' toys, and they're all like the little things. I mean, dice are super collectible, and people just love little things. And I mean, having your own personalized painted mini in a game, it's like Liz was saying, it's so fun that, I mean, this is your character. It's a physical representation of your character, and being able to paint that and like see it just like helps your imagination, and things that you're fighting. I mean, it's all good and well if you have a marker on a board, or you're talking when you're doing theater of the mind. But when you see the minis and you see it on the board, and there's something that you can actually see, it makes it more real. And I think, I don't know, I just love painting them.
Gary, what about you?
Well, for me, miniatures started with gaming. So I had no art experience before that. As a kid, my art experience was organizing my crayons in the box according to color, and that's what I did with crayons. Because when I would color, it would be terrible. My stick figures don't look like stick figures; they look terrible. But then once I started painting miniatures, because it came from the gaming hobby, I really wanted to be good at it, and I worked at it for years, took classes, studied under people, and it started to develop that, hey, I'm actually not terrible at art. I can do other things. And so for me, I kind of reverse engineered it. And that's how I got into miniature painting.
That's awesome.
Just a game.
We all start out, D&D. All of our D&D experiences starting out are different. Mine personally always started using minis in the games. Did you guys have the same experience, or were you introduced to minis, or did you have to like build up to using them? Maybe you started, theater of the mind at first and then had to, work up to it. What was your experience with your first minis?
I guess I'll keep the trend going. Actually, one of the big draws to the game was the minis. As funny as that sounds, because I play a ton of video games, and I grew up playing video games as well, monopolizing the system with two younger siblings was fun. But having a game, let me rewind. I enjoyed, one of the things I also liked about board games was the hands-on effect, like the hands-on experience. And as an artist too, that's how I learn, that's how I enjoy things, is being able to do these things myself, like in real life. So I remember my first campaign that I had joined, and I was like, how are we doing this? Is this a map? And we made sure I was like, okay, we're doing this. Like, I know I get that this is maybe not what everyone else signed up for, but we ended up 3D printing minis from their 3D printer, and it was just awesome. But it really, I'm a visual learner too, and I engage too very visually, and it just makes it so much more exciting. So yes, so I very specifically wanted to start playing D&D partly because of the minis, as well as the storytelling.
April?
Okay, so when the first game that I got to play in, I immediately told everybody in everybody in our group, because we've all been playing with each other. We've been playing with each other. We've been gaming with each other for a long time. We'd have LAN parties. We do card games. Like, I've got way too many board games. No, we don't. Tabletop games, but we have a lot of tabletop games. So we would always have weekly games, game nights. But finally, they were like, "Hey, we're going to organize this D&D group." So I was like, "Yes." And we're going to have a paint party for our minis. So yeah, that was like the first thing. I was like, we are going to paint our minis together. And so we had everybody over and we were all painting, and it was great. And I had my headset out with the light and everything because I was already like really serious into it. And I was like, I'm going to get the details. And I'd been watching YouTube tutorials, so many videos, because I was like, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be awesome. And it was okay. But yeah, so just right off the bat, I was like, yes, we're going to have minis and they're going to be painted and this is going to be amazing. So.
Is Gary?
So yes, I started gaming with minis. I wanted to play the game before I knew there was such a thing as miniatures, but then the first time I played, luckily I came into adult experienced gamers who'd been playing since the 70s. So they were old school, and they already had their own miniatures and dice, and they were adults, and I was like 11. They pulled me right in. Hey, come play. They're all family. And it was popular back east. They're all from back east. And from that point on, I was pretty spoiled, because then I would, in high school, okay, I want to play D&D with some people my own age, go over their house. Hey, what do you guys got? Oh, here's books. Okay, you don't have a map? All right, well, where's miniatures? We don't have miniatures. And a couple of them, some of them were, I was in drama club, big surprise. Hey, we're just going to get up and act it out. I'm like, you're going to what? No, really, where's the miniatures, guys? Come on, quit screwing around with me. No, we're going to get up and act it out. And that was early 90s, so things like Vampire the Masquerade were getting popular. Mind's Eye Theater was a thing. And I was like, okay, we'll have fun this time. I won't be back. Sorry. No minis, no game.
You didn't want to LARP? Come on. LARPing D&D.
That's a whole different animal. If I'm in costume and I get to beat on people with foam weapons, I'm all for it.
Yeah. But just walking around your living room, not so much.
not
breaking things possibly if you do decide to fight.
So, like you guys already touched on, Liz, you mentioned, painting these 3D, characters is very different than like a 2D canvas or whatever. So when you are starting to paint a mini, kind of just take us through the process, because obviously there's different paints, you're having to do shading, there's texturing, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of not only technical aspects you should be aware of, but also chemical aspects, because the primer you use and the paints you use, as well as temperature, can mess everything up. And I have examples. How great. So first and foremost, the most important thing you want to start with is a good base. I haven't tried this myself, but I have seen some people use a dark primer first and then spray from above with a lighter primer to create, for instance, a highlight that'll show through on your paints easier, so then you don't have to do as many coats with your paint, for instance. So base is super important. You want a good base. Next is your painting, which I like to start with a general base coat, because dry brushing and shadow washes are your friend here. So I'm just going to give you a little example. Let's see. We're going to look at Lulu. Lulu is from Descent to Avernus, and she is, let's see here. Sorry. I've been doing a lot of art commissions, so my nails are terrible. But Lulu is a pretty simple little hollyphant, small, but she's got a lot of detail. She's got wings and like feathers and all these little wrinkles, but you don't want that to get lost. So for instance, for her, I did a base coat actually of black because gold shows up a lot better on that. And it's also great when working with metallics to use a black base because all you really need to do is take your dry brush, which is like, it's like this. It's like a little fluffy ended brush. And what you do is you take like a little bit of paint and you just, and it's very light, and then you just brush it over. Then you get, boom, shadowed, trying. You get, hey, look at that.
There we
Gold
go.
with
Oh, nice.
shadows.
There
Very
we
nice.
see it. Very cool.
So, and you
Very
don't
nice.
lose any of your feather details, and you didn't have to spend 50 hours going through and painting each individual detail. So that's a big way that painting 2D differs from 3D. But now you've painted your mini, you did your base coat, you did your highlights with your dry brush. You used one of, let's see, these obscenely, ridiculously tiny, 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 tiny brushes for your tiny details. These stress me out. And then you want to do you want to seal everything. Word of warning. Now I'm going to show you a Zariel that was going to turn out it was going to be my best mini ever, and I ruined her. If it's too hot out, or if it's too cold, you should probably get your sealer or gloss coat, or I'm sorry, semi-gloss. We probably want semi-gloss, temperature regulated, because then you have this beautiful Zariel that now looks like she was in a snowstorm.
Oh, she's all frosty. You got the frosty effects.
So this was
Yeah.
on I think a 99-degree day.
Oh.
And
Here in LA, yes.
oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, this
Oh,
was going
wow.
to be a very pretty Zariel, but now Zariel is sad face. So that was, in a very big nutshell, mini painting. But research, learn from your mistakes, you'll make them, and double check to make sure everything's chemically good and temperature wise.
Yeah. April, how about you?
Okay. I mean, a lot of the same things. Just making sure, especially if you're getting factory, like you're just going up to the store and getting picking up a mini, to wash it, like getting an old toothbrush and scrubbing it and washing it, because sometimes it'll have some leftover residue and stuff. And so if you try to start painting it right off the gate, the paint's just gonna like flop, like just wash off. It's not gonna stick well. So really getting scrubbing it all off and then putting a base coat on. I usually use like a stone color, like a dark gray base coat for all my minis. And just like you said with the metallics, black underneath is awesome. Also, if you are getting 3D printed prints, like I got this one from Griffin Co. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but they've got little like print lines, like really like lines on them. So so not only priming it with a base coat, but also you can put a primer on it to where you can hide some of those lines. So when you do start to paint it, those lines don't come through. Is important. But yeah, Griffin Co. printed this for me. It's freaking, and it's
Nice.
huge, right?
Oh, it's
I
a
haven't
shit.
I haven't painted it yet, but I
Awesome.
mean, I know, I'm so excited to use this as rubble. But yeah, like, and then this one I did prime it already, but it's yeah, I haven't painted this one yet, but yeah, that'll help hide some of the lines. So you were showing your little brushes earlier. Are either of you a brush licker?
No,
Are you?
'cause
I gave up the
I used to oil paint, and then I was like,
Oh, and that was that. Yeah, no.
I lick mine to put a point on them when I'm done painting. I don't lick
Yes.
while I'm painting.
Yeah, I don't do it while I'm
Started to
painting.
does
Okay,
anyone
yeah.
lick the minis, or is that just me?
Oh, okay.
No.
I feel like I need to know more about this brush licking though, and then we can talk about mini licking.
There are legit support groups for brush licking.
But I don't have any paint on it when I'm licking them. I do it.
April, there's a 12-step program.
Oh God. I promise I don't have any kind of poison or weird things. No, I just because your really fine little brushes, I mean, they go like this, and you want them to have a nice little point when you're doing your details. So like one of the best ways to do, I mean, the best, easiest, fastest way to do it is you lick your brush and then it's pointed. And then you dip it in your paint and you go about your day. Very, like you said, it's a controversial subject, but I am one of them. Yeah. Yeah. There's also like lots of fun different kinds of paints. Like there's crackle paint for bases, which is amazing. Citadel has this really cool crackle paint for bases. I don't know.
Ooh, okay.
I like me
Yeah,
some
you
texture.
just put it on really thick and it makes this crackle dirt effect, which is perfect for the wasteland. There's also UV paint for when you're wanting to be crazy. I don't know if you can see this guy. He looks like this, and then under the
Yes.
glow light,
Oh, I see him.
he glows.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I had glowing rad roaches on our last set of Vault 42 this past weekend. We're gonna have some more coming up, but since they're supposed to be radiated and glowing, they're glowing in the video game. So it's like they're gonna be glowing on my table too. Yeah, and then using washes, really great highlights. I mean, I've learned to. There are showpieces minis when you're painting, and then there are table mini paintings because I could spend hours on a mini just to make it look just the way I want. But when you need to get stuff on your table, you got to like let some things go. So and that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It
Not
is.
everything has to be perfect set piece.
No.
So.
Gary?
Well, the first thing is, like April said, wash your minis. I don't care what mini it is. Yeah, Lindsay, your Hero Forge minis were bathed before I even did anything to them, even though they're pre-printed in color.
Right.
Gary, what would you use to wash them with, like a soap or detergent?
A little bit of dish soap and water. Let them soak for a little bit of time. Hit them with a toothbrush. If they're really delicate, hit them gently with a toothbrush, fine bristled, and send them there to dry or be impatient and blow dry them. And a good layer of primer. Oh, before you prime them, as Liz touched on, with the 3D printed, me coming from older school, I think I have 4 3D printed minis in my house of the X thousand I have. Mold lines, all miniatures before 3D printing were from 2-part molds, and they end up with a big seam somewhere on the miniature. Even the best cast minis will have mold lines. You can scrape them, you can cut them. If you're really careful, there are different techniques on doing it. You can look those up on YouTube. Typically for metal minis, I will use the back of my X-Acto knife, so it's like a 90-degree edge, and scrape it off. It works for some plastics too. Cutting is a little trickier because you might slice into the miniature and, oh, there goes her pouch or finger. And that's very important if you really want your miniatures to look nice. If you don't care so much they're going on the tabletop, have at it. And the other important thing is the first step is figuring out what is this miniature going to represent? Is he going to be, do I want to paint him grimdark? Do I want it to be all dark and shadowy and emo? Or is he going to be colorful and bright? And is this a gnome illusionist? Okay, let's go for the bright colors. What kind of palette can I throw on this? And again, not coming from an art background, that's something I'm still jumping into and still really learning, is use of color on a miniature and how that affects things. Because I'm like, color theory, what? I'm a typical Gen X guy. I see colors in the 16 box of Crayola. I don't even know what chartreuse is. So having to learn different, what's a warm green? What's a cold green? There's warm greens. What do you mean temperature? What does this mean? So all those things affect a miniature and how it looks and how the colors interplay with each other on the miniature. And again, we could go on that for hours. There are lots and lots of YouTube videos. There are lots of people on Twitch that stream themselves painting it and will talk to you about it while they're painting. They're magnificent.
Right.
That's how I start painting a miniature.
So for the 3D printed step, I just grabbed this off my table, but this is XTC 3D, and it's a coat that you can paint on 3D printed pieces. Here, I'll just hold this up for everybody to get a real good look. And I haven't used it on anything as small as a mini. So I would, before you jump in and like, well, Genevieve told me to use this, use it on a mini that you don't really care about to try it out first, or a larger piece that is printed. Like some of the stuff you showed us, April, it should work just fine for that. But it should be able to smooth over those printing lines without having to sand, because when you get those Hero Forge minis, which are awesome, it's great that you can do that, but they also, depending on how much money you can throw at them, depends on how many printing lines that they're going to have and how prominent those are. So we do have a question from the chat. Thank you, chat. What advice would you give those who are wishing to repaint their old painted minis? What are the best practices?
The painting
Depends.
Yeah.
Do they want to strip their mini, or do they want to just paint over it? Because most paints you can paint over. I'd recommend doing that. And if you want to strip it, that's a horse of a different color. Simple green is your friend. If you've painted no joke, any minis painted in acrylic, everybody has their own methods or their own techniques, but one of the main ones I know of and has worked for me is you soak it in simple green, unless it's an enamel paint job. If you use an oil base, that won't work. You're going to have to use something a lot more aggressive. For anything painted in acrylics, simple green, and not even pure, simple green and water, and 24 hours, you're done.
For those of us in the peanut gallery, can you explain just what simple green is?
It's an amazing cleaning solution.
Okay, got you.
I only know about this because in the Army, fun fact, basic training, that's all we used to clean with was simple green.
That's the thing,
I can't stand the smell. The smell of it makes me nauseous.
It could be a paint thinner, it could be a cleaner.
No,
simple
green.
It removes battery acid.
That's
so
true. Or Coke, maybe. So if you're not stripping it and you are just painting over, are you putting a new base coat over it? Like, walk us through a little bit about how you would go about doing that. Okay, Liz.
Oh, I'm like,
I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, actually, because like I haven't stripped a mini before, so that's great. Thanks, Gary. But painting over I have, because mistakes happen, as well as I'm sure everyone has had at some point, a mini that they painted like way long ago, and they want to spruce it up, make it all ferocious again. Give it some inspiration. But big thing with painting over is your paint needs to be thinned, because you're adding paint on top of paint, and with each layer of paint, that detail starts to go away. So with that, from the get-go, I like to cut my paint with a little bit of water. You really want to, it's a thing of patience. Like, you paint over with your thin coat, it's going to look terrible, and then you keep doing it until it looks good. That's pretty much what you do. But yeah, just be very sparing with thick goopy paint, because it's just going to collect in the corners, and your mini's going to have like no face or no armor detail. But also, with that said, just to rewind, priming is also important. Light coats, if you do decide to prime, which personally I do, if it's sealed with like a glossy or clear coat, which most minis are sealed with, it's like semi-gloss. But yeah, you can make the call on priming, but really, all in all, really light coats of everything, because it's gonna pile up and you already have layers on there.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely light coats. In fact, they call it, with priming, you don't even want a complete color coverage. You literally just want to give it some tooth, as they say in the painting industry. So one quick hit, done. You'll still see all the color under it, but the primer will give it enough to grab onto.
And make sure the can is far enough from the mini. Otherwise, that quick hit is going to be a bit more.
Yeah. And watch things like ambient temperature, humidity.
Yeah, that quick hit. From experience, I learned that it can turn into like the Nickelodeon, like the slime just pouring down. It's just like you get this slimed character. That's the saddest thing to
And now
ever.
you know, Simple Green takes it right off.
There you go.
You
April, do you have any?
can,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, I would not completely. So if you're wanting to fix the paint job on a mini, I wouldn't. I mean, just because, I mean, like you guys said, I wouldn't paint over. If you're wanting to completely like redo it, if you're going to touch it up, like it has some dings and scratches and stuff, like you didn't seal it, or when, and it, you know, just wear and tear. If you're touching it up, that's fine. But completely repainting over it, you're going to lose. I mean, they're tiny. You're going to lose so much detail. So I would just completely strip it. And I have, and I actually did it for Tipper. So Tipper for Vault 42, because I have 3 kids, and they like to paint all the minis. And this one, she had actually this huge comical gun. So I cut it off. I cut a few things off of her, and I added a pistol instead because I knew she wasn't going to be using this gun. And she was completely covered. And I didn't use that. I used fingernail polish remover, and worked like a charm. Fingernail polish remover, and it was just painted with Master Paint Series, or Master Series paint. Master Paint Series. Reaper's paint. Yeah.
Reaper Master Series. Yeah, that's what I use.
It's my favorite.
I'm a Reaper addict.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, like most of my minis are Reaper, or Modifius, because they have my Fallout themed ones. But this one was Reaper. But yeah, no, just a Q-tip and fingernail polish remover, and it completely stripped it. And then I just repainted her, and now she's good to go. Ooh. So yeah, and she's like, yeah, so she looks like a synth. She's covered in metal and stuff, but yeah, like all of it came off, went back to just the white Reaper mini, and was able to start from scratch. So
now, is that a plastic or a metal mini?
This one was plastic.
So the nail polish remover didn't hurt the plastic, the bones. Plastic. Nope. Excellent. Good to know.
Yeah, and I rubbed it really good with a Q-tip and that fingernail polish remover, the acetone, and it came right off. Didn't hurt it.
So you're saying there's hope for Zariel?
Oh, you don't have to redo her. There's ways to fix her.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, we'll talk after this. Or it'll be a question. Who knows?
So you guys have talked a lot about paints, and you know, there's plastic minis, there's metal minis. The plastics, I'm sure, also different types of plastics differ, the 3D printed stuff. How do you guys go about deciding the types of paint that you're going to use for your minis?
So the paints I use are paints sent to us by a sponsor. Yay! So I love free paints personally. So that's what I'm currently working with. Best. Yeah. Oh yeah, free paints. Ooh, suddenly they work better. But yeah, I'm currently using Nazgul's D&D mini paints. But like I personally, when deciding paints, I'm a big Reddit fan. And I like tapping into communities of what I'm looking for, like doing my same hobby, whether it be D&D minis or other things, and kind of see what everyone is enjoying and what I think are awesome paint jobs. And same thing on Instagram. If I see a paint job I really like, I'll even if it's not listed, I'll ask like, hey, what paints did you use? That's great. Because pigment is a big thing, because you, again, don't want to put too many layers because you're going to start losing detail. So the more pigmented paint, the less layers you likely will have to do. But yeah, just mostly seeing what's working for everyone else. And of course, love to support my local game stores. So whatever is also in stock there is always nice. But yeah.
Yeah. April, what about you? Because I know you've got, you know, the Fallout game, which is probably using some, well, you know, you've got, I mean, granted, we have Warforged in D&D, but you have a lot of very futuristic-y type stuff that you're working with.
Yeah. So my local game store is actually Reaper Miniatures. I live 10 minutes from Reaper.
You're in Denton?
Yeah. I've got the hookup. So
I only hate you a little
right
bit.
outside of Denton. I know, right? So I could go there anytime I want. Actually, they're in store. So their in store right now is closed, but yeah, we used to go in their storefront all the time and just like look around and get whatever we wanted. But yeah, so I love their paints. Their paints are amazing, highly pigmented. Just like a really, I mean, just the consistency of it is perfect. I've used other paints. Okay, so I know that some of these paints can get really expensive. That's the downside. I mean, if you're starting out, if you're not trying to do this like for a living or for streaming, or I mean, even if you are, I mean, you can use the apple barrel, the big. I mean, you can, but just know they're not gonna come out looking as good as if you're using high quality paints. But I mean, if you're not worried about that, then I mean, just use whatever you want, have fun with it. But yeah, no, I love Reaper's paints. Citadel, original Citadel has nice washes, has nice like the crackle paint, love those. But yeah, no, just for all the metal and stuff, Reaper has great the great paints for that. So my metallics and stuff.
Gary, you're also a Reaper fan. Yes, we heard.
Yeah, I've painted with most of the major brands that are out there. Army Painter I haven't really touched. Scale 72 or whatever is a new one. They're popular. I haven't touched those yet. But I've painted with Citadel. I've painted with paints that were back before we had miniature paints, testers, enamels, and then I painted with Vallejo, which is a very popular brand out of Spain, and I painted with Reaper. As far as Citadel paints go, most people, even people who are fans, have a love-hate relationship with them, just because for years and years they were known to dry out in the pot. And I'm not saying this was a Games Workshop marketing plan, so you'd have to buy more paint before you ran out, because they knew paint lasts a long time, and even if painting a few armies, you won't run out. But if it dries out in the pot, you have to buy a new one. I'm not saying that, but I'm kind of saying that. So although for those of you who are Citadel fans out there, or have paints that that are worried about this happening, the simple solution that I didn't learn until earlier this year, after having bought my first pot of Citadel paints before my 18-year-old was born, actually probably before that, store them upside down. The paint in the pot seals the crack, and the air won't get in, and they won't dry out. If anybody is a hacker, please post that on the front of Citadel Miniatures site. Hack into their website. I'm kidding. I wouldn't advocate that on stream.
Please
but do it. But post that on their thing so everybody who buys their stuff sees it. And it keeps
not that we're encouraging illegal behavior and
never, or international crime, because they're in England. But I'm a big fan of Vallejo as an excellent paint. They're a little thicker body than Reaper. They need thinning, but that brings me to a very important point. No matter what brand you're using or what techniques you're using, thin your paints. And by the way, the most important thing you can do is thin your paints. And the other most important thing I would say is thin your paints.
I didn't get that. One more time?
Yeah.
Some people paint with a wet palette. Some people use a dry palette. I'm a wet palette guy myself, although I found that with Reaper, you don't need them as much. Those work better with Vallejo, which is thicker bodied. But you're not painting one solid coat on, you're painting thinner coats. But Reaper's really good for that. But yeah, I'm a fan of Reaper. Citadel has some good stuff too. Vallejo has some great colors. Vallejo tends to rub off easier. Citadel and Reaper tend to stay on your minis better, especially the Vallejo game color. Those, if you look at them hard, it will strip off your beautifully painted miniature and then you'll cry. And always seal your paints. But sorry, the question was, what do you use? Yeah, I pretty much use it.
It's okay. April, you had mentioned, and this kind of, this ties into the painting as well. You had mentioned, one of your minis, you cut off a gun and put another one on there. For all of you guys, is that something that you guys routinely do? Are you kind of modifying the mini to make it your own before you paint it?
Oh, I'm actually better at that than I am at painting. And I'm a good painter. I'm not great. I'm constantly learning, but I'm pretty good. I can turn out a good miniature with enough hours. I have taken entire miniatures and retooled everything they're holding, whether it was steel or plastic, and spent way too many hours. And I can dive into that. Like some people will dive into putting 12 hours in painting a mini. I'll spend 15 hours converting a miniature. Haha, it was a wizard. Now like he's wearing armor.
Frank and Gary. Dr. Gary.
Yeah. And then Hero Forge came in and put me out of business. No, I'm just kidding.
There's still stuff they can't do.
They
There's
saw your
still stuff.
horrific crimes and they had to copy it. They're like, look what this man is doing to these poor miniatures.
Yeah.
Let's make a profit off of it.
Liz, what about you?
Actually, yeah, because I have a very specific example of one time I was looking for a red wizard, and I had a very specific idea because this was for a campaign where this red wizard was hiding his Thasian tattoos. But I couldn't find the mini I needed online or in store. So actually, I believe this is a Reaper mini. This is a, whoops.
It is.
This is,
I have 2 of those.
anyways.
Pick one.
Okay, here we go.
There it is. There it is.
So this is actually a long-haired drow. So I sanded his head down, his hair, to now look like folds in a hood. And then I cut his ears off, as well as sanded a little bit of the arch of the hood. So you'd see that he doesn't have a part anymore. It's all flat. So that's an example there of like, if you find like a long-haired elven a mini without the hair going all flowy and stuff, you can totally sand that and make a hooded character. But another one I'd like to point out is Zariel, who will come back soon. This is a 3D modification, but I realized that there wasn't a hole drilled in this thing, the base. So I decided to get a little fun with it, and I made rock terrain out of, this mini looks so bad. Anyways, rock-like terrain for the lava. Out of a sculptable plastic, but I also made a custom base for the stand. And then, yeah, I just kind of was like, okay, now we're going to do like rocks and stalagmites and stalactites. I always mix those up, so I'm just going to say both. But you can really customize your mini. Yeah, you just find a way, and you can have kind of almost whatever you want if you Frankenstein it up, as Gary had mentioned.
April?
Not a lot, but I mean, obviously for the stream, I have, because I wanted it to look a specific way. It's like, oh, why would Tipper have the big gun? I mean, she's never gonna find a gun that big in Fallout, really. So yeah, I fixed this one. Then also Ash. Ash is another Reaper miniature that I cut off her ponytail. She was holding a sword. She had its ponytail. Ash obviously has short blue hair, so cut off the ponytail, got rid of the sword. I think she had a gun in this other hand. Then I I sculpted some oven baked clay, sculpted her mallet, her super sludge on some wire, painted it, put it back. But yeah, so when I want it to look a certain way, it's usually for stream. So, yeah.
You guys got to put pictures of these in chat because I want to see it. Like, put a link to your face, something. I want to see this.
Yeah.
So since we're doing show and tell, here's one I had put up. We just finished this for the game I'm playing at home, playing Pathfinder: Rise of the Runelords. This is my son's paladin.
Oh wow!
It originally it's a Reaper mini. It had a mace. We turned it into an axe.
Wow!
Little drilling, and it's a metal mini. Little drilling, little wire. This was the one that I realized I had a problem. So this miniature originally had a cutlass in one hand and a flintlock in the other. It now has a giant falchion and a metamagic rod. Oh, and it didn't have a necklace when I got it. I added that.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well done.
And then I was at Fonco many years ago, and I had just finished that miniature and taken pictures, and we're having a party, and one of our friend who works for Hero Forge was there, and I pulled up pictures of that, and she's like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's what your company is here to do, is to do that so you don't have to anymore. And I was like, that's great. I hate you. That's great.
Oh, thanks.
They still don't have necklaces. They have rings now. They don't have
That's
necklaces.
true. They don't have necklaces because Mata needed a necklace and they did not have one. So she's got a bow tie.
Oh, you should have told me. I would have never mind.
I'm sorry, Gary. I didn't want to make your work harder than it was.
All right, we do have a question from the chat. What's something you discovered while painting? Something you didn't expect or figured out?
Warm and cold greens.
Warm and cold.
Okay.
Colors.
Colors.
72 box of crayons.
Liz?
Oh man. So actually, I would say dry brushing, because I really hadn't been using it much in like my acrylic painting before that. But ever since I started dry brushing with minis, which is kind of funny because initially I started, let's see, we'll take Shadow Jungle Claw, or I'm sorry, Shadow Jungle Paw is one of my first couple. This is my first character miniature, and she's a tabaxi rogue. But there we go. All right, I got a little distracted there with finding my minis. So, oh my gosh, get me back on track. I'm so sorry.
What did you discover?
Okay, thank you. That was embarrassing. It's been a long day and I'm very sleep deprived. But for instance, with Shadow, you see all these little tiny details. A lot of things that have been painted. Whoop. Everything is chaos here. Chaos. Everything has like a lot of small individually painted things. You also may see that there's no wash on this. That means I painted the shadows myself. That is insane. Don't do that. That mini took me probably 3 times as long as my Drow cleric, which she has almost. Anyways, she has a level of dry brushing to her, as well as like you could see under the cloak-ish, there's some lighting. Also, this blue spell is translucent. And I just use regular mini paint for that. That was another thing I learned is if you dry brush it enough, it will transfer a clear coat of the pigment to the clear elements. So you don't have to actually paint them over with an opaque color. But yeah, and then with dry brushing too, I actually have transferred that to my regular acrylic canvas painting as a technique that's actually helping a lot and making my paintings look more realistic. So I found like a bridge between both of my loves of painting. But as basic as it sounds, dry brushing.
What about you, April?
Yeah, washes are your friends, especially when you're speed painting, and just trying to knock some out where they look good, but they're not like showpiece. I mean, for me anyway, because when I want to take some time on a mini, I don't use much wash. I like to actually go in and create every single little color, which I know is ridiculous, but I'm crazy like that. Yeah, and then I can't help it. I'm just like, I want to be the one that puts that color in there, and then the wash is just not going to do exactly what I want it to do when I want it to look perfect. However, so gosh, I would say my eyes, how you do eyes, because everybody hates doing eyes and they think it's like one of the hardest things to do. And it is, but for some reason, I don't know, I'm good at it. So a tip with eyes is you, if you just do, so where the eyes are, get your tiniest little brush, black, just do a black oval, or a super dark brown oval, or a darker pigment skin, but black, I usually like black. And then do an off-white next on top of that, and then do your color on top of that, like super oval, circle, or a little bit of an oval, and then a little bit more color, and then boom, eyes, and they look so much better. But adding that black and doing that black first, it makes your eyes not look like they're doing, like Mickey Mouse, like crazy eyes. So it gives it shape and doesn't make them look crazy. And then even if you do mess up a little bit, just get a little bit of your skin tone, just fix it up here and there. But yeah, the black really helps give you a guideline of where and how your eyes should look. So
Yeah.
GW wants to know, is dry brushing good for both shadows and highlights?
No. No. Highlights, definitely.
Okay.
Dry brushing is one of those techniques. It can be really effective, but yeah, there's a time and a place to use it. If you use it for everything, your miniature will look good fast, but it won't look great if you use it for everything. So you want to pick and choose where you use it. For shadows, you definitely just want to put your paint on, and then start building your layers over that. And if you want to dry brush as one of your top layers, great. It works fast and it looks good. But for shadows, you just want to start with a base coat of some sorts. And then if you want to add more shadows, that's where the techniques April was talking about was the wash. And all these techniques, a wash is another one. I've been painting, I won't say how many years, and I just this year learned how to do a wash really well. And it's all about the right consistency. How thick it is. Is it about as thick as low non-fat milk? It thicker than water, but not as thick as regular paint, and it will pool exactly the way you want it to. And use a lot. Don't be afraid. That is an easy way to build shadows. But dry brushing is something you want for higher. It tends to pick up on raised areas of texture. Ergo, it won't pick up shadows. Liz, you're the dry brushing person. You might have something to add to that.
Yeah.
I have an example.
there you go.
Yay!
Perfect.
But yeah, no, Gary's straight on with that. Really, dry brushing is your highlights, and your washes are generally going to be your shadows, or unless you're using a black base and then dry brushing on top of that with a much lighter color, you can also achieve shadows. But normally I leave shadows for the washes. But another thing I want to show you that I did with dry brushing is gradients on some of the larger ones. So this is an earth elemental that I turned into a crystal elemental.
Oh yeah.
And so this was for a game that's being developed that I can't talk about too much right now. But for instance, I just did like a purple base, but then I dry brushed different layers of color, like light blue and then lighter blue and then white. So you can also do this almost like for a magical effect. I also like to do this on my magic objects, dry brushing for my magic objects with the glow, because the thing with dry brushing is it gives you that nice soft shading that's really hard to accomplish. Really hard to accomplish with individual painting with a tiny brush. So yeah, with that, it's great for magical effects. It's great for glow, but above all, you're trying to highlight and bring out the brighter tones.
Also, when you're dry brushing, using the right brush is very important. Do not use your painting brush.
Oh my gosh.
Have a
You will
separate
ruin it.
dry brush and a bigger brush. One really little known solution that I just came upon recently. Ladies, you all know what this is.
Makeup brush.
This
How
works
dare.
so good for dry brushing.
Yep.
And
That's
it's
awesome.
cheaper than most miniature brushes. I think I paid $3 for this with a coupon at CVS. And they'll last great. You won't wear out your other brushes because dry brushing is hard on brushes.
Yeah.
And you want something that holds a lot of paint in a very thin layer. Less is more with dry brushing. Go slowly. Or else you end up with big giant streaks, and then somebody picks up your mini and goes, wow, you dry brush that, I can see the streaks, which is not what you want. So go slow, use a big brush, makeup brushes look great.
This is to give you an idea, the differences between distance. The differences between each of my brushes compared to your painting brush to your dry brush. So like this one's for eyeballs, smaller details, and then your dry brush is significantly bigger and fluffy. Usually, or it's got a more fluffed out top, so it gets all it spreads the paint out more evenly.
Mhm.
And you don't lick those,
Those
just
ones I
for the
don't like.
record.
Don't lick
But-
those. Lick the big one.
But when I'm done painting, what I do is I take a little mist of like hairspray and tip them, so that way they're
Okay.
less sad. And I never leave them in the water anymore because I found out how to bend them that way.
I use the
what's that?
Masters brush cleaner, which not only cleans the paint off, but then you can kind of wipe it down, make it go to a perfect point, and leave it that way, kind of almost like leave-in conditioner, and it will keep your brushes.
Ooh.
We haven't talked about brushes yet. Brushes are, other than the paint and the miniature, they're the other thing you need, and water. Your painting will level up when you level up your brushes. If you have cheap brushes, your painting will never look well. Unless you're an expert, you're not going to get good results. A guy like James Wapple, if those of you have heard of him, was painting flat canvases for 30 years before he picked up miniatures 15 years ago. And now with $3 packs of brushes, he'll open a pack of 50 and start a miniature and paints with enamels and then wins Golden Demons. But he's not a normal human being.
Right.
He also wet blends with enamels right on the miniature, and it's like, look, you can see the fire. And I'm like, fuck you. Pardon me, French.
Oh, it's okay. What was the
and,
name of that product again, Gary?
Oh, this is
The chat is wondering. Brush.
this is the Masters brush cleaner.
The
And
master.
it's like a little hockey puck, and you just wipe your brush in it. And you can't see, my light is terrible here, but it's all full of paint. It's like the consistency of thick deodorant, like, it's like a hard wax, and you wet it and it forms a foam, and you clean your brush, and then you leave a little bit of on and form it to a point like that, or however, and you end up with a brush with a nice fine point. Now, a lot of people think that you need to have the tiniest brush to do a lot of fine details. A really good brush, which they're not cheap, they're made of Kolinsky sable. This is a fairly large one, but if it comes to a nice tight point like this, you can paint the finest details. You don't have to have a tiny brush. And the great thing is, your paint won't dry on the brush as you're painting as it does with the tiny ones. We use a ton of water, we're using flow improver, the paint dries, you got one eye, you want to go to the next one, the paint already dried. Bigger brush, the paint will stay wet and you can still hit the fine details.
Wow.
But those brushes take a lot of upkeep, and they're not cheap, and even when you buy the expensive ones, sometimes you get a bad one. And by sometimes, I mean probably half the time.
Right.
Those are the breaks.
Like makeup brushes.
Well, I feel like we're gonna need a part 2 on this because we still have a lot of stuff that hasn't been covered.
Holy cow.
I know.
We're there.
I have so many more questions. So many.
You
more
get all
questions.
these paint nerds in one area, and we'll just go forever.
I know. But that's all the time we have for today because April's got to go get ready for Realms of Ukador. Oh, that was the one you showed me the other day, Gary. Yeah.
That's a stone giant. You might even be able to see that.
Well, that's awesome.
Rad.
Ooh.
Trying to show the eyeball, but bigger miniatures are easy to paint the
So
eyes.
in the last, so real quick round, in the last like 30 seconds to a minute, like what is like your number one tip to people? If you have one. If
Yes.
not,
Yes, quick one. Which Gary kind of touched on, but quality of materials matters. It really does. And I learned that way later on in life than I wish I had. It's important to spend the money on things that will last. Otherwise, you're going to be using way more paint. You're going to be using way more. Your brushes are going to need to be replaced way more often, and your minis aren't going to come out how you want. And that's just the fact of it. So invest in things that are going to last you a while. Anyways, I'm done. Thank you.
Or get a sponsor.
Ta-da! Yes.
Oh my gosh.
gotta get on that.
Wash your minis. Wash your minis. Prime your minis. Seal your minis. And I already told you about eyeballs.
There we go. Yeah, the eyeballs. Is
And thin your paint. For the love
Thin
of
your
God,
paint.
thin your paint.
In your paint.
your paint.
Thin
Awesome.
them.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Liz, April, Gary, thank you for all your knowledge. I know we will have you back because we're going to need a part 2. Of course, come back next week. We're going to have Donna, the owner of Geeky Tees, on the show to talk about women in gaming and geeky businesses and all that. Genevieve, we've got the raffle.
Yes, we do. We have a raffle today. And all you have to do to enter it is type raffle into the chat. Our code is raffle. So please stay until the beginning of Realms of Ugador to see who the winner is. Again, type in code raffle in the chat and you are entered to win. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. We could have talked a whole other hour about this. I am passionate about painting and artistry. I know Lindsay is. So we'll have to have you all back on real soon to continue our nice chat.
All right, guys, take it easy.
Yes, bye.